Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. We are about to head into day 2 of the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell out of Idaho. This is the mother who is facing murder, conspiracy, and grand theft charges in connection with the deaths of her 2 children, 7-year-old J.J. Vallow and 16-year-old Tylee Ryan, as well as the death of Tammy Daybell, the wife of her current husband and co-defendant Chad Daybell. And speaking of Chad, the children's bodies were found on Chad's property. He himself is facing similar charges in a separate case and trial. Now, let's not forget, when it comes to Lori Vallow Daybell, if convicted, she faces the potentiality of life in prison. So there's a lot at stake here, but before you have a trial, you need a jury, and that is what is happening today. Day 2, of jury selection will be underway. The goal is to select 18 jurors, and they will ultimately be selected to hear this very high-profile and difficult case. I want to bring in right now Law&Crime correspondent GiGi McKelvey, who is live right now outside the Ada County Courthouse and was inside that courtroom yesterday with the defendant herself. GiGi, good morning to you.
Good morning, Jesse.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you about jury selection. I'm definitely going to go into that. But let's start with what everybody wants to know, because there were no cameras in that courtroom. There are some, I don't hate to criticize, questionable sketch artists renderings. That doesn't look like Lori Vallow Daybell to me, but that's my opinion. You got to see her in person. You were in that courtroom. Walk us through what she was doing, anything that you observed of her during day 1.
Well, we weren't actually inside the courtroom with her. That is only for potential jurors. We were in a media overflow room. We were watching it on a pull-down screen that had 3 different camera views. And it's a little bit hard to see details because the picture's not too big, but she was very engaged in day 1 of the selection process. She was conferring with her attorneys, taking notes. There were a few people that she really focused in and listened hard to their answers. Then you would see her kind of lean over and whisper with certain people. So for me, I thought she was actually more engaged than I expected her to be, and she really seemed focused.
No smiles, because we were actually just showing clips of her from a prior court appearance where she was smiling, and we know, look, there was issues of competency, whether or not she was even going to be able to stand trial. So any of these glimpses of what might be going on with her, no smiles, anything like that?
Nothing like that. I mean, we've seen kind of the animated presence she's had in the past, but I mean, yesterday it was business. I mean, she looked very focused on what she was doing, and I mean, she took several pages of notes. So I imagine that she's assisting in her defense and giving her opinion on who maybe looks good to her and who doesn't.
Let's talk about it. So my understanding is there was 1,800 prospective jurors that were sent questionnaires. There was a segment of those that were then called to the courthouse for voir dire, the jury selection process. Walk me through what questions were being asked of these jurors yesterday.
There were 2 questions that were consistently asked to a lot of the potential jurors. Number 1, can you convict on a circumstantial case? And they would give an example of, if you see a kid with cookie crumbs on their mouth and chocolate, did you have to see them eat the cookie to know that they ate it? Most said no. We did have a couple who said, yeah, I'd need to see it. And then the other question is, would you be able to convict if a cause of death can't be determined, which I think is interesting. We know the condition of Tylee Ryan's remains. She was dismembered and burned. And then with Tammy Daybell, we've never heard a cause of death. So it leads me to believe that either Tammy or Tylee's cause of death maybe hasn't been able to be determined. Those 2 were asked consistently. The other question, and it kind of gives you an idea of what might have been on that jury questionnaire, certain people were asked, you have a child that is 15. One of the victims in this case was 16. Can you look at graphic autopsy photos of a child and still be impartial? And most people said yes. There were a few that were hesitant, but ultimately there was nobody that said they could not be impartial when asked that specific question.
That's surprising, because this is going to be a difficult case. So the fact, and by the way, sometimes jurors think they can handle it, and then during the course of the trial, they might need to step down. That's why you have alternates, and it seems like you're going to have several here. My understanding, they were also asked, and I think this is important to analyze from the legal perspective, would you be able to convict even if the defendant wasn't directly a part of the murder, right? Because we know that Lori Vallow Daybell has been hit with conspiracy charges and murder charges. Did you get the sense of what the theme is going to be for the prosecution?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of get a little glimpse, which is they may not have any solid evidence tying her to the crime scenes, which is the circumstantial case. And then, I think the other thing, too, is that she didn't physically, or maybe, we don't know yet, but it's looking like maybe she didn't physically have a hand in any of the deaths. So with those two questions, it seems like this may be Alec Murdaugh 2.0, where all signs point to yes, but nothing directly linking her to those murders. And so they give the example of, the cookie, if you didn't see it happen. And it reminds me very much of Charles Manson. That's how I've always referred to Lori, in that she never actually got her hands dirty, but really may have been orchestrating all this from the sidelines.
Did any jurors say they can't be a part of this case? Maybe, scheduling is one thing, but saying, listen, I know the circumstances of this. I'm familiar with this case. I can't be impartial?
No, I didn't hear that at all yesterday, and that was something that they're questioning them about their media exposure off camera. We're not allowed to watch that. But as far as, just during the questioning, we're allowed to hear. Nobody said, hey, look, I know too much about this case. I've watched all the documentaries. We heard nothing of the sort, just the opposite, which every person said, I can be impartial.
Maybe that is, they moved this trial to a different county. Maybe that had a factor in it. Was it crowded yesterday in that courtroom?
No. One thing, Chad Daybell's attorney, John Pryor, sat in there with us pretty much the entire day, talked to pretty much everybody in the room at some point. But no, there were just a handful of reporters. I would say maybe 40 at most. That place seats over 200, I believe. And by the end of the day, there were 5 of us left in there. So right now, with jury selection, it's very thin. But I think it'll definitely pick up once it's announced that we're going to have openings. But right now, it's quiet. There were maybe 4 or 5 members of the public that sat in, but only for maybe an hour or two. So nothing too exciting in the courtroom right now. But yeah, I mean, I was surprised actually at how very little people were in there.
It may also be that the most, significant criminal case is happening in New York and all eyes are there. That's a separate question. But let me ask you this. So you say John Pryor was there. What was he saying? I mean, any idea of why he was there, what he was saying to people from the media?
I briefly just exchanged hellos with him. He was a very nice guy, I have to say. But, he gets to come in as a member of the public. These cases are severed, and, it gives him a huge advantage to sit and kind of watch this process and see how it's going to play out. And I'm curious to see, is he going to be a regular fixture inside that courtroom once we start testimony?
You mentioned what the prosecutors are asking, right, in terms of would they be able to convict. Is the defense asking any specific questions of these jurors that gives you an idea of what their defense strategy is going to be?
They've just been asking more broad questions. There was nothing really pointed as far as specifically to Lori. I didn't see anything. It was more the state that seems to have obviously they have the burden, but they were the ones that were asking the very pointed questions, where the defense was just asking sort of random general questions that didn't seem to have a whole lot of weight to Lori specifically. You hear these things at every jury selection process, it seems.
Okay, so where are we right now in the process? How many jurors were questioned yesterday? How many were ultimately selected or are going to move on to the next phase? And how many do you think are going to be questioned today?
Well, we know today there are 3 sets of jurors coming in, one set at 9 a.m., one at 11 a.m., one at 2 p.m., and they're bringing them in sets of 15. So out of the, math's not my strong suit, but out of the 3 groups of 15 yesterday, 17, made it past that process. So I'm surprised at that number, actually. I thought it would be much lower. I'm hoping jury selection goes a lot faster, and maybe we have a jury by midweek or at least Thursday.
By the way, so that gives us an idea about how long jury selection can be in opening statements. Have you gotten any sense of who these jurors are, their backgrounds, or anything like that?
Very broad. I mean, it seems to be, we can't see them. They're off camera, but for the most part, they sounded more adult, middle age, and maybe a little older. I didn't really hear any voices that sounded very young, but just all across the board. Some are stay-at-home moms, some are caregivers to people who are sick. People have full-time jobs. The hardship thing, there were a handful of people that just said, I can't do it. I have to take care of somebody. My job won't pay me. They're saying now this could be an 8-week trial. So that's a lot to ask of citizens to walk away from their jobs for 8 weeks. But for the most part, even people who said they had hardships on their questionnaire came back yesterday and said, well, I've got that taken care of. So it's interesting. People may just want to serve on this jury and hear the case.
As I said before, and I'll say again, GiGi McKelvey is our eyes and ears of what is happening in that courtroom since there are no cameras allowed. We are not permitted to see what is happening. GiGi, thanks for giving us an idea of what had happened in day one, and we're looking forward to your recap of day two. Appreciate it. All right, everybody. So we are going to take a break. We're going to continue our coverage here on Law and Crime. I'm going to be signing off, but when we come back, we're actually going to show you a little bit more of the interview that was conducted of Melanie Gibb. This is Lori Vallow's former good friend who spoke with police, gave her insights about what she observed, and we know that she's going to be a central witness in this case. We'll take a quick break. We'll see you on the other side.